Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about laying fabric out and laying it out the correct way and laying the pattern onto the fabric. And for the pattern it says I need 2 meters 10. So I've bought roughly around 2 meters of fabric, and when I lay it out I have to make sure that I've laid out 2 meters and not the width of the fabric, and that's the mistake people usually make. So in order to make sure that I have 2 meters, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the selvedges together. Now the selvedges are the woven edge of the fabric. So this is the woven edge of the fabric. So I'm going to put it together, and when I put it together and lay the fabric out, I should get 2 meters. Now if I put it together this way, I haven't got, if you look at the length, I haven't got 2 meters of fabric, although my selvedges are together. All I've got here is the width of the fabric, and I'm going to talk about widths of fabric in a minute. But to lay out correctly, I need to fold my selvedges so that they are lengthways, and I should have half the width of the fabric. So if you see the way I'm folding it, it's already longer. I'm going to move a bit. So it's already longer, so I know I folded it the correct way because I now have 2 meters of fabric here. Now selvage of the fabric, the selvage is the woven edge. So this is not the cut edge. The cut edge is this edge, the edge that they cut to measure the 2 meters I needed. So I will always be able to pull the threads. Now, fabric comes in 2 main widths. So you usually get 115 centimeters, which is 45 inches, or 150 centimeters. They are. Now that I've laid my fabric out and I've got my 2 meter length, I can start to lay my pattern on. Now when you're laying your pattern, you'll realise that every piece of your pattern has an arrow on it. So this is a big piece, you see the arrow here, and this is a smaller piece, this is a pocket piece, but you can see the arrow there. Okay, so every piece of your pattern has an arrow on it, and the arrow is called the grain line. So this is to make sure that you lay your pattern out so that it's straight and it falls in a certain way. Now this grain line, which we see here, has got to run parallel with either the selvage or the folded edge. This edge here, I'll move it over a bit on this side, this is your folded edge, and this edge here is my selvage edge. Now some pattern pieces you have to put them to the folded edge, and they will just come, when you cut it out and it comes out, it will just come out as one big piece. But because I am cutting out some shorts, there's nothing that goes to the folded edge. But if it does go to the folded edge, it will say so. Look on where the grain line is, and it will have a double arrow, a double-headed arrow, and it will say place on fold. So make sure you do that, and when you cut it out, do not cut up the fold, or else you may have to recut it a bit. To make sure this is the right grain, I'm just going to put it off grain at the moment, but because I'm working with some stripes, I could see it's not the right grain. But to make sure you're getting the right grain, first of all you lay your pattern on, to what you think may be the right grain. And then what you have to do, pin one side of your grain. So I'm going to pin the bottom, just place a pin in it. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure from the arrow at the bottom to my selvage, and I'm just going to put my finger where the measurement is. Then I'm going to come to the top of my grain line and put the measurement just on the selvage of the fabric, and I can see where the end of my tape measure is, that it's not meeting my grain line. So I need to move the pattern over so that it meets the tape measure. So that now means that the bottom of and the top of my grain line, they're the same distance from the selvage of the fabric. I've just pinned it there, so if I was to measure the bottom again, it'll still be the same measurement, because remember I put a pin there to anchor it. So you have to do that to all your pattern pieces. So straight grain is important, so if you remember, the arrow on your pattern has to run parallel either to your selvage, which is the woven edge here, or to your folded edge. Now some people usually ask me when I'm teaching them, how do you know how many pins to put onto your pattern? And I will say, if you put your pins about every 5 centimeters, and definitely at the corners. So I'm just going to bring this up a bit. So like this corner here, I will put a pin, and then maybe about 5-6 centimeters here, I will put another pin, and so forth. So they're quite spaced out, but definitely at the corners and about every 5-6 centimeters. The only thing when you put your pins in is make sure that they are not sticking out of the edge of the fabric. So if you put one in like this, I'm just going to bring the camera in a bit more. See, this is sticking out of the edge. So when I go to cut, I may forget that this pin is sticking out, and I will cut the pin, and it doesn't do good for your scissors. Make sure you've pinned all the pieces onto the fabric before you cut, because sometimes you can pin one piece and then cut it and get a certain way into your laying out and realize you haven't got enough material, or you didn't place the things in the right position. There's two things you can do. Well, you may have to buy more material, but before you cut anything, have a look on your pattern. I'm just finding my one here. Have a look on your cutting layout, because all commercial patterns, they have cutting layouts, and if you think this one has a lot of different cutting layouts, remember, I've got 3 views on here, view A, B and C, and also they'll show you in the 2 main widths of fabric how to cut things out. So maybe have a study of your cutting layout if you are new to sewing. And if you're a bit more experienced, make sure you lay everything on the fabric before you start cutting, to make sure that everything fits on. The reason that I folded my fabric in half when I was getting ready to cut it is because a majority of the patterns that we buy nowadays are symmetrical. Like this one is symmetrical, this one is symmetrical, quite a few of them that I have are symmetrical. So you only get in the pattern envelope, you'll only get half the pattern, so you need to fold your fabric in half, and your pattern will say cut 2, so you only cut in 1, but because your fabric is folded in half, you're cutting 2. And did I say fold your pattern in half last time? I think I meant fabric. So that's what it is for symmetrical patterns. Sometimes you get patterns that are asymmetrical, like if I look at this skirt, if I bring it closer, like this skirt, it has a drape just on one side. So if I was to cut this skirt, I will have to open out my fabric fully and cut probably the fronts, and the back of the skirt is probably on the fold. But this is what I call an asymmetrical pattern, and probably this one as well is an asymmetrical pattern because it's got a drape on one side and probably not on the other. I haven't opened it yet, but I will see when I do. So for symmetrical patterns, fold your fabric in half, place the pattern pieces on uncut. For asymmetrical patterns, you need to open out your fabric fully and place the pattern pieces on it, and you usually cut in one piece at a time. Okay, so after me telling you that it's important for the grain and everything else that you lay your fabric out so it's the length you bought, and when it's folded in half, it should be around 57 centimeters. If you've bought, say, the width of your fabric you bought is 115 centimeters, so it should be folded in half. There are times when you may have to cut your fabric the way I told you not to, and this is one of them times, and it's mainly to do with the print. Print is printed the opposite way, or maybe it has a border and you're making a skirt and you want the border to be at the bottom, then you'll have to cut it opposite way of the grain. Now this fabric, it's got the word high life on it in various places, and it's like a one-way print. The highlight life is coming down this way towards my selvage. So anything I make, I have to put the hem down this side. So if I'm making those same shorts, let me get the pattern. So here is the shorts again. If I'm making them, then I have to lay it. So let's see, make sure you see the grain. It's a big piece. So the grain, here's the grain line. The grain line is following the cross grain and not the straight grain. Okay, so this is my grading ruler, and here it's got a line that will give me the degrees that I want. So what I'll do, I'll put that line onto my straight grain line, and then I will draw another grain line. So I've got a straight grain and a cross grain. Just draw it on a pattern. I'm just going to mark some arrows in. So if it's normal fabric, I'll be using this grain line. This is slightly different fabric. It's like a one-way print, and I will be using this grain line. And also with this print, I can't cut it double. I have to cut it single as well. I hope you found this video helpful about laying fabrics and pattern outs. And it will help you in your sewing journey. So